Hey guys, Pretzelman 945 here. Welcome back to another video. Um, I'm not exactly sure what I'm gonna title this video, but in today's video, I am gonna be doing uh, uh, my favorite game slash games in various categories slash my best award for certain games. Like I said, I don't really know what to call it, but basically, this will make sense once I explain it. So I have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine categories, and what I'm going to do is explain my favorite game for a particular category, or maybe a few of my favorite games for a certain category, and why said particular game has the best has the best story or combat or and some examples. Now speaking of those categories, the nine categories are story, combat, general gameplay loop. I'll explain the difference in a minute. Um, best bosses, characters, villain, music, graphics, and exploration slash world design. Now starting off with story, realistically, I put down five games here, but I think I'm only going to talk about two. Because there's a lot of games that have incredible stories, like the other three that I put down on here, Xenoblade 3, Rebirth, and Metaphor. But the only reason I'm not going to talk about them here is mostly because I'm going to talk about all three of those games probably in several other categories. So, I wanted to kind of freshen up the list a little bit here, and so, um, uh, uh, And the thing is about this list with a lot of my favorite games, something I should preface is the fact that a lot of these a lot of these could take high spots in a lot of these categories, and there might be even more categories I hadn't even thought about when making this uh list and video. So yeah. But for story, I'm gonna go with two winners because of the fact that I generally go back and forth pretty regularly on which of these two ends up winning best story for me because of two different reasons. Well, two games are Witcher 3 and Star Wars The Old Republic. And the reason why they kind of switch back and forth is because The Witcher 3 in terms of games is um the best single complete in one game story of any video game I've ever played. Um Watching the development of Geralt's character and just the ridiculous amount of plot twist as you learn more about Aradin and his like villainous motivations and whatnot. Um and then just seeing Ciri's incredible character development alongside that um just makes the singular story like absolutely brilliant. But then the reason why I say there are some days that Swoter ends up winning is because of the fact that Swoter is such a massive game that there are so many bits of story content that are beyond levels of peak. Like there is story content in Swoler that I consider to be peak fiction. Namely Knights of the Fallen Empire and Knights of the Eternal Throne. Both of those expansions, in my opinion, are peak fiction. Um, excuse me. And just the sheer amount of content and incredible stories all in one game just never ceases to amaze me how such a feat is possible. And even though I don't really play the game as much anymore, like those memories I have of the just just so many moments of brilliant story is why Swoyer is the second of two winners for that particular spot. Okay, moving on to combat. We have three different entries here, and this is basically gonna act as like my um top three, and I'm just writing something down there. Um and these are all gonna be for very different reasons. So starting off with FF7 Rebirth. And this kind of applies to the remake as well. The kind of like um remake trilogy FF7 new active combat system. Now, what I love about this is the whole active combat, the whole action part of it feels really damn good. Like it feels really nice to generally like move around and fight bosses and just kind of slash shit as well. But what really makes this like a step above, I feel like, is the way that like using the menu and the ATB gauge kind of slows down time. So in a way, it's kind of mixing these new action RPG ideas with the kind of turn-based um combat of the original game. And I think it's a very nice mix, the way that that comes together, because I think that the action elements in the combat, in addition to this mechanic of slowing down time with strategy regarding materia and ATB and technique use, adds a lot of depth to the combat, which would have already been a really good action RPG combat system. Now Metaphor is a winner of this category just quite simply because the Persona series has the best turn-based combat of any video game, and Metaphor takes the Persona formula and refines it even further to a absolute T. Like we're talking more refined than a sword sharpened by an expert blacksmith. That's how refined and just perfected this formula of turn-based combat is. There is no active time element, which I'm not really a big fan of. Um, all the moves feel amazing. The kind of resource management that is a um, critical part of a good turn-based combat system is full of life in the metaphor combat system. And in addition, like on top of like in another way that it refines the formula for the Persona series, there is this mechanic where depending on it's similar to a Xenoblade mechanic, which isn't what I'm a really big fan of, but like this combining this with the already brilliant turn-based combat of Metaphor just is absolute chef's kiss because Metaphor introduces the kind of Xenoblade system of where the enemies are sort of all around you in an active environment in like dungeons and stuff, but also even like across the open areas and zones that you can explore as well. Um, um, and and depending on like whether you are higher level than an opponent, or an enemy, then you can like it's different with various weapons, but like you can do a physical attack um on like in that open area, and you can either use this as a way to surprise attack to gain an advantage in a turn-based battle normally, or you can just completely wipe through waves and waves of weak enemies, and it feels so satisfying just like spamming the button just to clear them all away. And even if they manage to attack you in this sort of situation, it never causes much damage. In fact, the only situation where you're really put in a disadvantage is if an enemy ambushes you, and that leads to a turn-based situation. But that didn't happen to me very much. However, the number one winner for this category is by far Ghost of Tsushima, and it's not close. Um, well, it is kind of close, but like there's a decent separation between Ghost of Tsushima and these other games because Ghost of Tsushima has so many good elements to it. It has like number one, there's the kind of feel of the combat where swinging your sword around and just slashing the absolute crap out of enemies and like perfectly performing combos using all the different styles depending on what type of enemy you're fighting just feels incredible. And then on top of that, like that is just one avenue of a lot of different potential combat ways that you could go because there is also, in my opinion, Ghost of Tsushima has the best stealth mechanics of any video game. So there is that additional aspect to the combat as well, which makes the which just adds a very interesting element and diversity to the combat as well. And there's also the ability to use a lot of different like additional weapons. Like you can use a bow, which is almost a completely different play style in itself in a way. You can also use like kunai and throwing spears, and maybe those are the same thing, but um, you can use like tons of different weapons. You can use like bombs and smoke gas and all this crazy stuff to where like you can create your sort of own unique play style by combining different elements. Um, or you can play a little bit of a different way with like potentially some things mixed in and whatnot, but avoiding other things. And in addition to how incredible the combat feels, the way that you can like ever so slightly diversify the way that you do combat in Ghost of Tsushima just makes it the absolute top dog for me in this sense. Okay, now general gameplay loop. Now, what I mean by this, is not necessarily like when it comes to combat. What I'm referring to with this is the other repeated parts of gameplay in a video game that are different from combat encounters or boss fights. So as such, games that are primarily combat focused don't really have a place in this category. An example being probably the top. I'm actually starting with um. Well, is it the top spot? It's probably tied with the other game here. One of the ties for the top spot here is Persona 5 specifically. And yes, I could have done Metaphor because, yes, it does refine it in certain ways, but there's something about replaying Persona 5 specifically is just like I love the kind of comfort routine I get from replaying that game specifically. So even though Metaphor did refine the formula, and it's probably better in that way. I still prefer Persona 5 because of the fact that there is this more um comfy, familiar element that I enjoy. And the other tie for it is Minecraft, because of course Minecraft is a game where you can do anything you want. So of course it's gonna have like the best gameplay loop. And then the other secondary winners for this category are KOTOR, mostly because this is the game I think I've replayed the most. And every single time I replay it, I have an absolute blast with all the mechanics. Uh, so like not solely judging the combat encounters, even though that's a good portion of the gameplay in this game. That's not what I'm solely judging exactly. Um, and then the most recent addition to this list, and the only one that this game was any kind of winner for, is DK Bonanza. Just because, as I explained in my review of the game, um, the gameplay just feels incredible, and even after only playing a little bit of the post game, it's like one of those games that I can tell where the general gameplay loop is just absolutely fantastic. Now, getting to best bosses, we have two entries for this. The top winner is, of course, Hollow Knight. Because this is a Metroidvania, and exploration and bosses is kind of what it's built around, and so as such, it has a lot of very unique and very, very good bosses. And I'm sure the same thing is already the same thing, in my opinion, has is applying to Silksong, even though I've only beat three bosses in that game so far. And the other entry I have, the kind of secondary winner for this category is Rebirth. Um, Mostly because in my opinion, one of the biggest improvements from Rebirth to Remake is the fact there was a lot more diversity in the kinds of bosses that you fought, and I think a lot of them have pretty cool mechanics. Whereas Remake was kind of hindered a little bit by giant mech syndrome, where a majority of the bosses were gigantic Finra mechs that generally had really annoying mechanics. Um, Now, in terms of cast of characters, I have two winners here. I don't know if they're exactly tied or one is first place or second place, but um we have Rebirth and Xenoblade 3. And with Rebirth, I love how every single character gets so much more expansion than even from Remake. You have the fantastic introduction of a lot of new characters like Sid and Yuki and Vincent. And of course, this is also the game where Cloud had moved into best protagonist non-fiction territory, entered my top 10, because his development throughout this entire game is just absolutely incredible. And then Xenoblade 3 for a lot of the same reasons. Noah is another one that's pretty high up there in terms of my favorite video game protagonist. I don't remember exactly where he plays in that list, but all the other characters as well get absolutely exquisite development throughout the course of the entire game. In terms of villains, it's Star Wars: The Old Republic is the sole winner for this category because I could have put Sephiroth, but even then he doesn't even come close to the peakness of Valkorion as a villain. And if you want to hear why I think Valkorion is peak as a villain, go watch the villains list I made. Um, because I don't remember all the points I made on him, and I would do a better point explaining it in that video than here. But he's my fourth favorite villain in all fiction, if that tells you anything. Now, in terms of music and soundtracks, I only wrote down one winner, although I do want to mention a few other winners here, even though I didn't exactly write them down. I'm going to do this anyway. Um, Other secondary winners for soundtrack are Xenoblade 3, Minecraft, um uh Hollow Knight. There's a ton of games I could list that have absolutely stellar soundtracks, but the reason why Skyrim is the winner for this category is because not only does the main theme do such a perfect job of encompassing the vibe of the game, but also the way that the main theme and Sovereign Guard are the same song but different rhythms and whatnot and different like composition, but the lyrics are the exact same. It's just pure musical genius. And also the amount of different music that's in Skyrim really means that it can suit so many different environments, and every single song in the soundtrack is a goddamn banger. That's why it's the best soundtrack. Now, graphics wise, Ghost of Tsushima easily clears this, and it's not even close for any other game. And I will preface, I was playing on a Steam Deck, which runs games pretty well, but it's nowhere near the level that like a top-end gaming PC nowadays would be able to run and fully utilize Ghost of Tsushima as a game, which just tells you how graphically incredible it is and looks as a game. Um, all the environments feel so real that there were so many moments where I had to pause and I was just like, am I even playing a video game right now? This looks so incredible. Now the last category, exploration and world design. I have three winners here. The first one is Hollow Knight. Um, because exploration and is the whole name of the game, and I think that the way the progression works in Hollow Knight is genius. And then there's Skyrim, which used to have the number one spot, but now it's the second place spot but I still am so deeply in love with the formula of Elder Scrolls games, and in a sense, this kind of applies to Oblivion too. But I still think Skyrim does it better, which is why it's mentioned here. The kind of freedom to go anywhere in the world of Skyrim and basically do whatever the fuck you want and not feel constrained by the main quest in any way at all just feels amazing. And um even if it might lead to some continuity issues in the world in terms of like, if you beat the main story before the Imperials or like the Stormwatch quest line or something like that. But me personally, I don't really care about those things. And in fact, um for me, that aspect just makes Skyrim's world to explore all the more better. However, it is not as good as the exploration and world design of Ghost of Tsushima, and part of that is because the graphics are so beautiful. But I think Ghost of Tsushima also has one of the most brilliant game mechanics I've ever seen in the Guiding Wind, which almost makes a map completely irrelevant because of the fact that you can just follow the um uh wind to your location. And it's such a simple system, but the way that it kind of blends in so seamlessly with the environmental effects and the way that it places into the world, like very few games I've seen kind of incorporate they kind of don't really do both things. They'll do one of these two aspects really well. They'll either have a very immersive world or it's have fantastic mechanics. Ghost of Tsushima is, I feel like, the only game I've ever seen that really tends to marry these two concepts together so perfectly because it has fantastic mechanics, but like the guiding wind is also something that fits so perfectly with the natural effects of the environments that you're exploring, and as such, it goes together like even better than jelly and peanut butter. But yeah, that was this video. Thank you very much for watching. Tell me in the comments below what um are your winners for these various categories. And if you have any more, include those as well. And because there's a very good chance I might have forgotten a major category that would have been good to mention for something like this. If a comment I see happens to bring up a really good point I hadn't considered, I will reply to that comment with my own pick for that particular category that I had considered. But yeah, for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.